I'm pleased to have as our guest Mr. Galen Windsor from Richland, Washington. I first heard of Galen from a tape that somebody gave to me some months ago, and I found his story to be absolutely fascinating. His story is unique, to say the least. Galen has been in 77 different cities in the last 2 years lecturing on the subject of nuclear energy. The majority of his life, the last 35 years, he spent processing plutonium from nuclear reactor sites. He has worked in the Manhattan Project facilities in Hanford, Washington, Oak Ridge National Laboratories and Nuclear Plant in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, General Electric's Midwest Fuel Recovery Plant in Morris, Illinois, General Electric's Fuel Fabrication Facility in San Jose, California, and Wilmington, North Carolina. And he's worked in every major reactor decommissioning project around this nation up to this present time. His major work in these projects has been the analytical process inventory control, which means that he was responsible for measuring and controlling the nuclear fuel inventory for these projects. Galen Windsor has few peers in the world in this area of expertise. And those few peers admittedly know and agree with the things that you'll be hearing on this tape. However, except for 2 or 3 of these experts, they've all chosen to remain silent for reasons which they only know, leaving this man then the burden of leading this lonely battle of exposing what we call the nuclear scare scam. He's without question one of the world's foremost authorities in nuclear radiation measurement, and he's recognized by members of the Atomic Energy Commissions of all the major nations of the free world. Mr. Galen Windsor. God bless you.
Thank you, Ben. We've been considering today how best to approach this subject so that you would feel comfortable with where I am. And we thought it might be appropriate to start with how I got involved in this game. Now, in 1945, I was a Navy radioman out in the Pacific on a destroyer aimed for Japan. We had a one-way ticket. That's all you get, just one way. So as we were becoming proficient at our business of fighting war, the Manhattan Project caught up with us and did a job. Now, the weapon that was dropped on Hiroshima, Japan in August 6, 1945 was a U-235, fully enriched U-235 weapon, where the material was separated and purified in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. The one that was dropped August 9th on Nagasaki was a plutonium weapon made at Hanford. But to those of us out in the Pacific, it was quite interesting. It had a ticket on it that says, "You get to go home." I was impressed. Now, I was stuck out on Guam after the hostilities quit and was running a radio broadcast that communicated with 4,500 ships west of Pearl Harbor. Quite a few to listen to every dot and dash that I made. So I was used to having people listen to me. They couldn't see me, but they could sure hear me. I had all of the good messages that were to come to them. Fleet movements to Red Cross messages. They came along one day and says, "We'd like to have radiomen to go down to Anahuac for the atomic bomb tests." Not me. No way. I want to go home. So they went through and they took every third radioman to go to Anahuac. I didn't go. They let me come home. But I wanted to go home. I had a driving need within me that says, hey, that big firecracker, I want to know how it works. I want to know everything about how it works. So back to the ranch in Nevada where I grew up and stacked hay all summer, gained back the 40 pounds that I'd lost out there in the islands. Into Brigham Young University in the fall of '46 in chemistry classes. Dr. Joseph Nichols could make an old farm kid like me love chemistry. I hadn't had any chemistry in high school, but the way Joe Nichols taught it, I wanted to know. So chemistry it was. And some neat guys like Carl Eyring taught me physics. And along in '47, I ran across a cute blonde from Richland, Washington. Now this girl had been telephone operator for General Leslie Groves and Dr. Enrico Fermi on the Manhattan Project. She got to put through the calls to Franklin Delano Roosevelt for these guys. So she talked personally to FDR. And she told me some of the stories like you've never heard. She says, oh, in those canyons, great things are done. This cowboy from Nevada couldn't even imagine what she was talking about. Well, in 1947, after we were married, I ran until she caught me. But I wasn't going to get married anyway. I wanted to get my education. I had to get on with this thing. And so we went to Richland, Washington for the first time in September of 1947. I saw that those buildings she was talking about were there. 1,000 feet long, 11 stories high, 5 of them below ground. Tremendous things. And people all over. Camp Hanford in those days was a whole army camp just there to secure that place, to provide security. Thousands of soldiers. You move around out in the desert and hop out of a foxhole and pop a soldier with a gun in his hand. There wasn't any horsing around. It was all business. Back to school. In 1950, I applied for a job up there before I had graduated. And they were in such bad need of chemists, I had a job before I had my degree. And so the last year of my chemistry, mostly English, I did on a bus, riding 25 miles to work in the morning and 25 miles back at night. And I did advanced grammar and business writing and all of those things on that bus. But in September 1950, I got into this thing called plutonium processing when we did it barehanded, without instruments, without coveralls. We had some of the most peculiar acid burns in some of the shirts. And I found one of those the other day. It's got acid burns all up the front of it. Plutonium on it too. Amazing. That was normal operation in those days. We ran those facilities and we ran them so well that by 1965, we had separated enough plutonium when it only existed in the parent uranium matrix to a half of a single weight percent, 0.005 weight fraction of plutonium maximum in that fuel. And we processed enough tons of uranium to recover.
So just to reiterate that point, they would handle plutonium with no safety gear regularly.
Enough plutonium by 1965 to meet the weapons needs of this country 10 times over for the foreseeable future. Now we're talking about a massive amount of work. Hands-on, do it type thing. And there was a couple thousand of us and we were just happy as could be, just working like mad, making those plants run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in a community that ran on shift work, A, B, C, D shift. The whole community that way. a wartime community, people dedicated to doing a job, and we were doing it, and we did it well. No pretense. Oh, yes, there were. Out in the reactor began to sneak in people who wanted a radiation monitor behind every reactor operator. Why? We know how to make these things run. When we got a metal fuel element stuck and it fell down on the trampoline back of the reactor, we'd go in with our feet and kick it off into the pool, smoking, burning. If you didn't have an instrument, you didn't know it was too hot, so you just went in and kicked it. Finally, along came a rule maker that says, thou shalt not do that. You'll get burned. Oh, I didn't get burned when I did it last week. But you exceeded the limit. Well, where did this limit come from? Turns out that in 1934, the International Commission on Radiation Protection fabricated a limit for X-rays. It was no longer permissible to be burned by them, erythema, reddening of the skin. You now had to keep a limit called 0.2 of an hour per day. How much is that? Well, you've got to have one of these Beckman instruments to read it, and you have to keep time of exposure. You know, there are 4 requirements on this thing: the size of the source, therefore the strength of the source, the distance from the source, the time of exposure, and the intervening shielding to keep from getting burned. Oh, fine. We've been doing this thing for years now, and we've never been burned. Why have we got these rules? And they says, yours is not to ask questions, yours is to do and die. Don't you ask questions. If you do, you might disappear. Those who broke the rules didn't appear the next day. Military rule? Oh, yes. Absolute. What was your appeal? And people you were working with one day, when they weren't there the next day, you didn't go inquire why. You were just grateful you still had your work to do, and you kept right on doing it. Now, this is in the United States of America. Well, in 1960, we found out that the materials that we were working with, the thing that we called high-level waste, that if you waited 3 years, these million-gallon tanks that high-level waste went into boiled off 15,000 gallons of water a day. Fairly hot? Oh, yes. This material that if it ever broke a line would seal itself off in the ground within a foot, make its own glass. It wasn't going to go anyplace. We did that a time or two, accidentally, of course. And so we started packaging this cesium-137 in casts and railroad cars like that and shipping it to Oak Ridge, Tennessee. And they'd take it out and make it into a barium titanate and press it into a pellet. And those things were so hot that they actually glowed in the dark from the infrared heat. Now, thermo-ionic conversions came along at this time. So you hook these little heat sources up to thermionic converters and you took electricity out this side, no moving parts. These things went into the SNAP program. And these early SNAP power generators are what powered the underwater transmitters for our nuclear navy. We've got a regular roadmap under the sea. All you got to do is have an instrument that knows how to find it, and then you've got eyes on a submarine. You didn't know that, did you? The power from it came from this material that they now call waste. We processed that stuff and packaged it outside at Hanford. Well, we had rules that said 3R per year is your allowable exposure, that amount of gamma energy that will expose a film pack. But that was for the people that didn't know. We weren't about to follow those rules. We just went ahead and did the job. They send around an investigation slip that says your dosimeter was overexposed 2 weeks ago. What did you do? And they had a cute little form on it that says accidentally exposed to light, and that was the one I always used to check. Because it's the same amount of light. You know, if you get gamma through the film pack, it's the same amount of light as you get when you click the lens on a camera. They wanted to limit us to that. And one day we looked up and they had limited us to that amount of exposure. Then the fun part of the game begins. You say, who limited us to that? Are they powerful? Yeah, they control the purse strings. They live by the golden rule. Them that's got the gold makes the rules. If you like your work, you keep the rules. If you don't keep the rules, you disappear. Sure enough, some of us disappeared. Some of my friends gone. Where'd they go? I don't know. Well, 2 years ago, I started traveling for American Opinion Speakers Bureau, and one of the documents that they had was Major Jordan's diary. A story of shipping the technology and the material that was developed at Hanford in 1944 directly to Russia on US Air Force planes out through Great Falls, Montana, Fairbanks, Alaska, under the auspices of one Harry Hopkins, and with the at least tacit approval of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now what are you going to do? That thing that we had been doing and feeling so good about had been shared at no expense with Russia. You go back and you check the record and you find Russia did not develop their own nuclear atomic weapon until 1949, even when we supplied them the material and the knowledge. 4 years after we touched them off at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We weren't happy with that. We were just happy doing our job. Well, in 1965, General Electric was ready to leave Hanford. I'd worked for General Electric for that 15 years, and they took me out to California, San Jose, and we had in mind to design and build this nuclear fuel reprocessing plant at Morris, Illinois. They told me they were going to build it at San Luis Obispo. That's how they got me away from Hanford. But that was just to get me away from Hanford. I got to design the sampling analytical system for this plant. The sample cell was the hydraulic heart of this place. I got to dictate where they put the columns, how high the columns were in relation to my sample cell. One man standing in front of a lead glass window could sample any liquid stream in that whole plant. It took crews of men at Hanford to do the same thing. I wasn't happy with that, so I built an efficient system. I got to design that. I got to build it. Conceptual design, detailed design, build it, operationally test it. And in 1973, they says, forget it, friends, you don't get to run it. We had 170 tons, metric tons of spent fuel stored in the basin. And the then president of the United States, do you remember who it was? Jerry Ford. Says, friends, no way, you don't get to run it. That's when I started to kick over the traces. Up to that point of time, I thoroughly enjoyed my work. I had no limitations, practical limitations. I had all the money to spend. I was in charge of the design effort. I built it the way that I wanted to because it was technically correct. All I had to do was check with engineers and make sure that it was right. And all of a sudden I was told, you must reduce your limits of exposure by a factor of 10. I says, I won't do it. First thing you know, you got the word that says, oh, yes, you will. I says, no way. Well, that's when the rebel, Galen Windsor, started to show up. And when I found out that by management conference, I couldn't get to these guys. I figured out another way. Now in this plant is a beautiful pool. It's got a place to store spent fuel bundles till it won't stop. 660,000 gallons of water, demineralized, just as clear and pretty as it can be. Heated to 100 degrees Fahrenheit when the outside temperatures are a -20, wind chill factors down to a -60. And I found out that I could swim in that rascal. You turn off the lights at night and it had a light blue Cherenkov effect. And this kid from Nevada that never could pass up a warm swimming hole used to go swimming in that pool. There wasn't anybody that had the nerve to swim with me, but since I was manager of safety and analytical service at this plant, it was mine to use. Oh boy. I found out that I could do that. I showed some financial types one time that I could stir that pool with my bare hand and check out through the same radiation monitors they did without triggering it. GE didn't like it. I got a letter from him that says, "Thou shalt not tell financial types that you can swim in the pool, that you can stir it with your hand, because if they find that out, they will steal the inventory. They will know that the inventory can be stolen." Oh, is that a valuable inventory? The same material that's labeled high-level waste by our current government, our current Congress. Now, plutonium is an interesting chemical element. It is created in a nuclear reactor. The Manhattan Project built 8 of these reactors at Hanford. The first one took 12 months from sagebrush to nuclear steam to build, and it had never been done in that size before. How could they do that? Why did they do it? To create this element called plutonium. Plutonium has been assessed as being the most hazardous material on Earth. Now, from the standpoint that you can make an atomic weapon out of it, yes, it is quite hazardous, because a piece of it that big, 2.5 kilograms, that's only 5 pounds, is the force that delivered 20,000 tons of TNT equivalent over Nagasaki. Indeed, it is hazardous. The one over Hiroshima that had fully enriched U-235 in it was 5 times as big. So plutonium is more dangerous than U-235, is it not? By a factor of 5. Takes 5 times as much U-235 as it does plutonium. Therefore, it is the most hazardous thing. Enter the great pretenders. They said that 5 grams of plutonium, properly distributed over the face of the Earth, would kill everybody on Earth. Now, if you can only get one 20 kiloton weapon to go on 2,500 grams, how's 5 grams going to kill everybody on Earth? Early on, I had a fear that said, if there is this much fissile material that can undergo a chain reaction, we called it in the beginning, then if you set a match to it, all the fissile material in the world is just going to keep right on going. Totally unfounded fear. It turns out that when you're in this business of recovering plutonium, like we recovered so much of it at Hanford, we found out that if you have it in a solution where it's less than 5% plutonium, it won't go critical any way that you kick it. And when you get it to 100% plutonium, you better be careful. Because if you put it in more than a 5-inch diameter cylinder, you're playing with fire. You can undergo what is known as an uncontrolled criticality, accidental criticality. The air turns blue. If the cylinder is sealed, it will explode from steam pressure. And that steam pressure builds up in a millisecond, which is about that long. No, you don't horse with it. And then you find out that those 8-foot thick shielding walls on those canyons were put there because they didn't know how much was a critical mass. They says, if we make a mistake, we don't want to die, so we will provide the shielding. And so the shielding thing started for no other reason than they didn't know what was a critical mass. Well, through the years, we got pretty good at telling what a critical mass was. And I have worked in a plant where I had half a critical mass in this hand, barehanded, dressed in street clothes, half in this hand, wearing a lab coat, and I'd put this half in a pocket on this side and this half in a pocket on this side and walk down the hall. If those two ever got together, there would be a blue flash. They never got together because I was in between them. And we do that every day. And each half had to meet definite dimension characteristics. And so we'd take them down and pass them one half at a time, and they'd measure it and say, yeah, that one will pass. And then we'd pass them the other half, and that one will pass too. But they were carefully put in separate bird cages so they couldn't get together accidentally. Well, those of us who worked with it enjoyed it. We knew what we were doing. We worked at it. When the President of the United States decided not to operate that fuel reprocessing plant, I started scrambling to find out what was going on. Many things had been done in the name of health and safety. Don't get burned. You got to have a safety record. You have to be safer than anybody else. We were already safer than anybody in the whole world. Well, you can't afford to get burned with this. You've got to enforce the limits. You've got to keep it. And I says, hey, that's not what the ball game is at all. I'll bet you the ball game is something else. And in 1982, when the Congress passed the Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 1982, a guy by the name of Mo Udall, I don't know whether you people in Arizona have ever heard of him or not, authored that bill. It's called the High-Level Waste Disposal Act of 1982. The material he called waste is the reusable uranium fuel that I had been working on for 32 years. Needless to say, Mo Udall and I do not agree on whether that material is waste or not. The name of the game then is, who owns the plutonium and how much is it worth? The government says, bury it 3,000 feet deep in basalt, and we'll hold a contest among the states to see who gets to bury it. Oh, why do you want to bury it? Did you ask the owners? Who is the owner of the plutonium? May I submit that it's most likely the nuclear power ratepayer. He is paid for the mining, the fabrication of the parent uranium, power generation, and is being charged in advance for its burial. If you're paying for it, to whom does it belong? How much is it worth? In inflated dollars, a ton of reusable uranium fuel contains useful metal isotopes worth upwards of $10 million a ton. Mo Udall says it's high-level waste. The value of reusable uranium fuel scheduled for permanent disposal probably exceeds the national debt. Naturally occurring plutonium quantities, and you know plutonium does occur naturally. Plutonium-244 is found at the residual activities of the several, 8 at least, Oklo phenomenon reactors across the world. First one found at Gabon, Africa. Naturally occurring plutonium quantities have been enhanced by transmutation of uranium. That's the reason we built reactors in the first place. Our ability to detect and measure emissions from these elements is useful in inventory control. When fissile elements, fissile isotopes are present at less than 5 weight%, plutonium-239 equivalent, and the heavy metal oxide matrix is stored dry in air, it has no critical mass. Remember, we talked about shielding was because they didn't know what a critical mass was. If it is light water reactor fuel at less than 5% equivalent fissile content, you can handle it, you can do anything you want with it, you can stack it up, you can have a room full, you can have a handful. As long as you keep it dry, it will not sustain a chain reaction. What then is all this falderall about a little bit, 5 grams will kill everybody in the world? They don't know what they're talking about. And when they say that, they're thumbing their nose at measurement experts like Galen Windsor. I am insulted when they say those things and get away with it because it has no bearing on the truth. It cannot be mishandled. It will not expose any person to an unshielded nuclear reaction. In other words, no controls are necessary except to prevent the pilferage of the inventory. Have you got that one? Let it register. Do you need governmental rules and regulations and instructions? No way. Then why do we have all of those rules? Inventory control practices capitalized on the fear of undereducated masses who work in the industry. I didn't say anything about ordinary people now. I'm talking about the people who have worked in the industry and those who cast stones from without. The Ralph Naders, the Jane Fondas. Now, it doesn't take you much thinking to find out that maybe the industry is the source of the problem. The industry is the one that made up the committees that made the rules that the Congress enforced. You ever thought of it that way? The strangest kind of feather bedding that's ever been dreamed up, it makes the railroad engineers look like pikers. The only amounts of fissile process materials that are of health concern to the handlers are those that can accidentally cause an unshielded nuclear chain reaction, or that will cause erythema from the shortest wavelength, highest frequency, and therefore the most easily shielded ultraviolet light emissions of the electromagnetic spectrum. Big words. Let's see what they mean. The emissions from uranium, plutonium, cesium, all of those things are only important if you assemble an amount that if you get this amount and this amount together, it can go critical. You can get a blue flash and therefore get burned. And that's happened 34 times in the business, and 8 men have died as a result of that. Accidental criticality. Documented in Los Alamos document 3611, if you want to check the source. Or if you've got enough of it together that it's giving off ultraviolet light of this particular wavelength and frequency without any intervening shielding, enough to burn you sunburn you, erythema, reddening of the skin. If it's less than that, if the effect is less than that, then what is the problem? Excessive government regulation. That's what's the problem. Tritium. Heavy water. Deuterium is hydrogen 2. Tritium is hydrogen 3. If you let an inventory get away from you, what's going to happen to it out in the biosphere? Nothing other than it will become diluted and join the naturally occurring inventory of tritium, because tritium is created in the upper atmosphere by sunlight. We have a natural inventory of tritium. Then the only thing that happens when you release tritium, which is the trigger mechanism for bombs, it's the source of the push that makes it go, is that you lost a valuable inventory. Then what of these people that are pretending that a little bit of tritium is going to do you in? It is not so. What are those 2 points? Only if it is an economically recoverable concentration, or if it has a natural reconcentration mechanism. You know, there isn't any one of the radioisotopes out there that has a meaningful level of reconcentration in any of the species, not even the oysters in the bays in Maryland below Calvert Cliffs. Why then are we still playing this game that any amount of this material is of hazard? Reusable uranium fuel, which has been isotopically enhanced in power-producing reactors, is a valuable national resource, not a high-level waste. The utility operators recognize the future worth of this commodity. Mo Udall, in that Nuclear Waste Policy Act of 1982, imposed a tribute of $1 per kilowatt hour, $1 per megawatt hour on all electricity produced in a nuclear plant, so that they can research and develop methods to throw it away. Why do the utilities willingly pay this amount to the Secretary of Energy? To limit their liability exposure. Who pays that amount anyway? The consumer of nuclear generated power. You have no choice, and therefore I call it a tribute.
What up, y'all? Oh,
Oh no. Then gone.
what up? Sorry, Bob. I had to mute you. Your background is always so loud.
Oh,
All right, go again,
sure.
Bob.
Oh, I was just saying hi to everybody, and I said hi to Braxton. How you guys doing?
Good.
Good to see you, John Bob.
Good to see you too. Is it loud now or no?
Yeah, you might want to set your mic to automatically adjust, because some people have been mentioning that the levels are really crazy, and if we're all set to that setting, it'll keep it in check.
How do
But yeah, so this is Galen Windsor. Weird video. I made a video like last year, kind of like critiquing, like the video looks a little deep fakey to me. And I don't know if it's just because it's like film that's been put digital, you know, it just looks a little weird. But if it is, it's a really well done one. It's not like a NASA one or anything like that. Like some people actually like with like skills did it. But I don't know. It's just a little odd of a video to me. But this video, you know, is pretty dope. Because this dude, I mean, he was the guy. And he seems legit, and I don't know why he'd go around saying all this stuff if it wasn't true. And then this leads into, like nuclear bombs being fake. It's all just boogeymen trying to scare us into. It's a justification for taxation for the government. Like if we don't have reasons to need the government, then why would we'd all be like, why are we giving all our money to this government if they're not doing anything for us? As long as there's the nuclear scare, we're going to need government to handle all the nuclear stuff. So it's just like inventing space travel and NASA and all that. As long as this idea that we need to get off our realm because of something bad happening or global warming or nuclear bombs or stuff like that, we're going to be like, all right, well, we need to make sure we pay our taxes so they have NASA sending, so they can fund NASA to send rockets up there. Like it's all this unending BS, train of bullshit that we have to pay for, and then and it all starts, it starts with stuff like this. At least the rabbit hole, this freaked me out when I first saw it, but I had already, growing up, kind of was skeptical about nukes, just because why haven't we used them again?
It's a big bluff.
Yeah, it's just like, why haven't we been back to the moon again? It's going to be hard to sell a new generation of people on the moon footage, and there's going to be too many people critiquing it. They're going to get caught. That's why they've never done it. And that's why they didn't do a lot of moon landing movies in the past 30 years. They didn't until the flat earthers started talking about it. Because if they do a moon landing movie and it looks really good, then that proves that they always could have done a moon landing video, So,
are you talking about works of fiction about the moon, like movies where the subject is about the moon, or
about
space
the
travel?
Moon landing specifically hasn't been done until recently, because tons of flat earthers were pointing this out. Eric Dubé was pointing it out in every one of his videos.
So
Jack Talcott's in the house.
Jack Talcott got some crossover, the biggest crossover since the Avengers.
Jack's page is getting big. He's got good numbers. He's got some.
So this reminds me, there was this movie I watched a couple months ago. It was really a cheesy movie. It was one of those disaster films, I think, like Roland Emmerich or something like that. It was about the moon. The moon, its gravitational orbit was disrupted, and it was coming to crash down into the Earth. You know which one I'm talking about? Yeah. So that movie was such a trip because it's revealed. I mean, kind of spoilers, but it's it's just kind of a B movie, honestly. It's revealed that the moon was secretly a alien satellite that was built by robots or one of those Cylon kind of critters that is throughout science fiction.
What movie is this?
Ray Slever's asking the hard
Go and
question.
shut down the. They have to go.
Do you know what movie it is? Do you know what movie it is?
I think it's called Moonfall. It's got
Moonfall.
Halle Berry in it, something like that.
Okay, that's a James Bond
Halle
movie.
Berry's.
That's a James Bond movie, isn't it? No.
No, not a James Bond movie. It's literally a big production B movie from Roland Emmerich or is it the guy that did the 2012 or the days? What is it called?
It's not the movie about the Nazis on the moon, is it?
No, it's not the Nazis on the moon. It was
that movie. That movie's really funny.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking about. They go to the center of the Earth, and he's riding a T-Rex and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, not stuff based on Operation High Jump.
Yeah.
The conspiracies around that Nazi UFO technology. No, this one was a trip to me because, like, out of all the stuff about the moon, that seems like very likely to me. The artificial satellite, like, there's too many things that are a coincidence about it that make it seem like it could be an artificial satellite, but it's like it's so old that it's just like an abandoned, like, orbiting craft, and it's just so beat down that you can't recognize it as a piece of machinery. It's just like an old rusted out truck, you know. It'll return back to the earth at some point.
Yeah, you want to know something weird about that? I've looked into that a little bit, and there's this weird thing where, like, if something hits the moon, it actually swells, like, I guess kind of suggesting that, like, it's possibly hollow. And then what else?
Or it makes a gong sound, they said, when they landed one of the land.
Yeah, the orbiter dropped a piece off and it rang like a bell. Yeah, they said that.
Yeah, right.
I've heard that too.
Were you guys any of you guys on Boy Scouts? Were any of you guys?
Well, if you look at all the impact craters, they're all like the same depth. They don't go any deeper than a certain dimension.
Well, and also, why are there impact craters facing the Earth? Were we shooting at them at some point?
I mean, have we seen the other side to know that there isn't any?
Everywhere I've been on the planet, in the world, I've seen the same like image on the moon. It's kind of weird.
Well,
the moon in Nicaragua was like it was like Tic Tac
tidally locked.
Yeah,
they do claim it's tidally locked.
So
yep. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that's not part of the conspiracy to me, because there's other celestial objects that are tidally locked, like they don't rotate on their own axis.
Yeah.
They don't have their own rotation based on the planet that they're orbiting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you know, I when I was 15, I sailed on a boat from Valparaiso, Chile to San Francisco, and I had the dog watch, which is the watch that's from like 4 a.m. to 8 a.m. So like I got up in the middle of the night, and all there is I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't make sense that nothing's really moving. I don't know. Like I would wake up and watch the same. It was 8 weeks nonstop. So I was out there bored looking at the sky. No internet, obviously. It wasn't even times of internet, and you know, the same stuff would just go by, and then like when I was in Nicaragua, like you'd look straight up in the air and it would be black. It would be super blue everywhere. You'd look straight up and it would be black. And then when the moon was full, it would look like a Tic Tac there. It was so weird. Like, I don't know, just weird stuff. But I asked a bunch of Nicaraguans if they thought that we were spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, and they laughed at me. It was funny. Nicaraguans, like your average Latin American, is far more like politically minded and like kind of more realistic than most Americans. It was pretty wild going down there and living for a while. But
hey,
I don't know.
Speaking of looking at things in the sky, me and Teresa saw what appeared to be Starlink going across the sky. So I don't know. We didn't know what it was at first, but we kind of looked it up. It looks like a choo-choo train going across. Like it's a long train. It's a long string.
Oh, did you see?
Yeah,
dude. You saw the internet antennas, quote unquote.
It was just a long string of lights that were going across.
Starlink. That's Starlink.
Yeah, that's what they said it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they just fly drones with lights on them over cities, and everyone, you know, and then on the internet they say, hey, that's Starlink, and so everyone's like, oh, it's Starlink, you know, just like they have something that flies over North America twice a day that they say is the space station. You know, like you can go outside and see it go by. Someone told me to do it. I went outside and I saw something go by, but like that was just something. You know, I can't identify that as the space station because someone told me it was the space station. You know, because that's just not enough for me. So
And they
so
also got
the Starlink thing, I think they're running, you know, in place that, you know, they're just running some op, you know, they have some sort of bright, you know, there's something going on. They're just flying some shit over the cities and enough people. It's just like what they do these launches from Vandenberg in LA. We saw one, we literally saw one the other day. We're just watching and I was like, oh, look, SpaceX, you know. And it was all, she's never seen one. I've seen 3 of them now that we got to watch a whole SpaceX launch. And it's like, it's such bullshit because they fly it all the way down the coast. So LA, Orange County, a bazillion people see it, you know.
Is that even a good trajectory?
No, like why do they always go up and out and down, you know? Like why don't they just go up like they used to show us they went up when I was a kid, you know? My dad worked in Vandenberg as a paramedic, and we were picking his brain about the launches because I was asking him because he's seen some of the SpaceX ones, and I was like, do they look the same as they used to? And he was like, not really, you know. We were seeing like weird blue sparkly stuff falling off the back, and you know, like you know, and it's just a show, you know. And like you drive through LA and you go by the airport and there's a giant SpaceX building, you know, and it's like every Tesla dealership is like right off a freeway, so you see it, like, you know, it's just like it's too obviously such an op, you can't get around it, you know. Like there's no way no one knows about, you know, who Musk is and all this bullshit space stuff. But you know, like there's all these people that think there's a Tesla floating around in space, you know, and you know, like Justin Pedini.
Name drop.
Or space.
But yeah, the whole nukes are fake and space is fake. Space travel's fake. It's all the same op that's been run on us since.
Dude, I'm not gonna lie. Owen Benjamin definitely put out some really good expos.
Yeah.
They spend a lot of money on teaching us the wrong information to keep us confused.
Yeah. And this is just kind of, I mean, if this is legit, this is proof of it, because, you know, and then in all the nuclear bomb movies, they always show people getting irradiated and dying. When I was working with Luke Radowski, he went to Japan and went and like toured the nuclear Fukushima and all that stuff. Yeah. And like I was always skeptical of Luke. I worked with him for a long time, but I was always skeptical of him, and seeing where he is now, it makes sense that, you know, he's a part of, he's in the team. He's on the team now. But when I worked with Luke, he had like a plane ticket. He could fly anywhere in the world whenever he wanted. And so I took care of the website and content and aggregating articles and writing articles. That's when I wrote that article about traveling that I think is his biggest article ever. But I was asking him, I was like, dude, did you really go see like deformed people? You know, and he's like, yeah, sure, man. You know, and he was like, just like had these like BS answers, you know, that weren't very like convincing. And he was like running around with the Geiger counter, like freaking out, you know, oh, there's too much, you know, he's like doing all this stuff. And if you know Luke is the guy at Bohemian Grove every year. He's at, you know, he goes to all these events that are focused on the fake political reality TV show that's going on. That, you know, just is like convincing people that they have a choice when they don't, basically. So it's like, he's and that was a big part of why I stopped working with him, because I was just like, dude, why are you focusing on all this fake shit? You know, like I was like, dude, it was like I was like hella like woke at the time, like just like on 10. So I was just like, what are you doing, bro? And we ended up having a falling out, and I stopped working with him because of a bunch of stuff like this, like that, you know, where I'm just like, why are you spending so much time going and, you know, chasing after Hillary Clinton and things like this, you know, when we're learning all this other stuff, you know, that's way more important, and it shows that, you know, we're all just, you know, here, you know, in this operation that they've been working on us for a long time. And like, you know, this also brings to mind like the whole the Laurel Canyon conspiracy, with all the rock bands in the 60s, all the hippie bands. You know, they were all agents. They were all terrible bands to begin with. They were all awful, god awful bands that got big, like the Doors and like the Birds and the Mamas and the Pot. Like there were a bunch of bands that came out at the same time. None of them had any talent. They eventually put some shit together and like had some okay music, like anyone can really, but for the most part, terrible bands. I've been into rock music my whole life. Allie too. The Doors sucked. Oh my god, they're so bad. Like the Beach Boys, like all that stuff. These dudes were all army brats, military brats, you know. They're like, hey, let's get our kids to run these ops, you know, they keep it in the family type of thing. You know, we'll make them famous. We'll let, you know, Hollywood make them famous. Everyone will listen to their lyrics, listen to the things that they're about. We'll vilify them in the media, and then no one will want to be anti-war because you'll be labeled a hippie, you know. And that basically got rid of all the conservative anti-war people during Vietnam, was that op. And it's same kind of, you know, it's all the same stuff where it's just like everyone's so gullible. I don't know. I just ranted for a while, so.
No, actually, what you were saying was making a lot of sense. I was enjoying listening. That actually makes a lot of sense that they'd get a bunch of bands together just to trick people, you know? I could
No, they
see
all
that,
live.
providing information from a dozen different sources. And I mean, what's a
Dude, search
dozen
it.
different? What?
Search it online. There's tons of information about it. It's called the Laurel. They all lived in the same neighborhood in Laurel Canyon, all recorded the same music with like all the same producers. And up in that canyon is a military installation where people think they shot the moon landing videos, is up in Hollywood. We rode up there on our bikes to go look at it. Jared Leto owns it now, but it's a
Dude,
massive.
that moon landing? Sorry, that moon landing, though, that was fake as fuck.
Yeah. So there's footage of artificial moon in this studio that's like a wall-sized moon, a round moon with a camera pointed. Like there's some really like, you know, where back in the day no one was questioning anything, but now we look at the footage and we're like, what is this? Like, holy crap, this is super obviously fake. But they have to keep it going because if they admitted this, then what else would they have to admit? So that's what the government, the powers that be, are kind of screwed right now. That's why they're having to use deep fake stuff, and they're having to make everyone's TVs like so high def that everything looks artificial. Basically, they're blurring the lines of like what looks real and what is real with the like AI deep fake stuff, and so like no one knows. You know, everyone just watches videos these days. Everyone just reads the headline, and no one really deep dives anything. So
I've kind of quit deep diving. Fucking, it just got so sickening after realizing how many times we've been lied to. These days, honestly, I hate to say it, like I read some, but not as much like into it. Because when somebody says the government's up to something, odds are like 99% that they are. And I'll just take their word for it and save myself some time. I hate to say it, but Jesus, they're some corrupt, crooked, lying bastards. I just assume the worst from them.
Yeah.
So, sorry for the rant.
Yeah. So that's why I just like everyone's like, oh, you just think everything's fake. And it's like, yeah, man, like look at all that. Like it was like there was remember the Boston bombing? There was like some footage of someone with their leg blown off, like getting carted off. And like all these doctors, all these orthopedic doctors were like, that's not what the inside of a leg looks like, and it's like, once that kind of evidence comes to light, the whole thing is a hoax. You can't, because all these people were like, oh, that was, like they were trying to say that it didn't matter or something. And it was like, yeah, it matters. Because like if they faked one thing, then they're faking everything really, like, because it's all encompassed together. That's why they're having to like, that's why with all the flat earth stuff has been really fun watching the reaction from Hollywood, NASA. They're trying to cover their bases because they left a bunch of plot holes open, like, and all these internet sleuths, have looked at all the footage over and over and over again, are like, wait a minute, like, and like, why don't we have footage of this happening? And why don't we have footage of this happening? Wouldn't we have like tens of thousands of hours of like footage for everyone to look through if this was really happening? And we're putting $1 dollars, $5 into this program. Why don't we have like cameras pointed off of every corner of the space station all the time? Like, what is going on? How come they're so secretive? And then the footage they put out looks fake as shit, and then they like half-ass it because it's almost like they don't even care. They want people to get all crazy about it because it feeds the division going on in the country. Flat earth.
Well, yeah, they want to feed that division worse than anything. They want to feed the division, keep people confused and divided.
Yeah. But yeah, so all this stuff ties in, and it's well, I saw something the other day. They were using AI to like analyze the space footage, and the AI was just like, no. It was like, this is it was, and it's like, if the computers are getting that much better and AI is supposedly getting better, I don't think AI will actually ever be fully AI. I think you'll always have to program at some point. But I'm not like an AI doom and gloomer. But if this stuff's getting better, we're just gonna use the internet and AI to debunk all this stuff, and it'll just kind of, I mean, it's gonna be so old, no one's gonna care. Who cares what they did in the 60s, like. Which is, I fair enough, but like, you still have to know how corrupt your handler is,
AI scares the hell out of me.
No,
I think we're going to have an iRobot scenario.
No, you don't have to be scared, John Bob.
It is what it is, Me being scared.
A human has to program everything. They're never going to have complete control.
You don't think
that's all
Elon?
No, it's all Elon Musk doom and gloom BS. We need to leave this. We need to go to other planets and stuff like that because everything's gonna run amok here. We're gonna have Terminator, and that's why movies like Terminator exist, is to scare everyone. Like all these dudes, they're all funded to make these movies that are psychological ops on the community, on the population. Everyone uses, how often is that term, it's Terminator, like a Skynet, like everyone uses this stuff. Everyone, like it's why, the Germany, everyone, talks about Germany, as like the pinnacle of all evil. Like these things we've been trained to, it's like the bar has been set. So yeah, that's why I don't buy anything coming out of traditional media. Never have. I mean, I used to, obviously I used to buy all this stuff. and that's why that's like whenever I interview people, like I talk to people, I'm like, how do we agree on so much yet disagree on this part, this big thing where you seem like you know what you're talking about, but then you're completely giving all your faith over to the powers that be, to believe in this thing, enough to like invest your own money in it, which is your money is your freedom, basically. You got to look at it kind of that way these days. So like if you're investing a bunch of your money in space companies and space isn't real, like you're really screwing yourself. you know so I don't. And it was funny because like in like 2012 I hung out with a bunch of dudes in Hollywood, and we used to do Ron Paul events, where like a bunch of like we'd have like politicians and stuff come by, and just like all kinds of people from the Hollywood area. And these dudes, my buddies, who were hardcore ANCAP liberty, well, they're ANCAP leaning, like very interested in anarchy as well, but they were all caught up with jobs and paying taxes and shit. But they're very much libertarians. They're all just like going crazy about Elon Musk, and I was like, "Who is this guy?" And they showed me some footage of rocket testing, right? The landing rocket testing, and I was like, "That's fake, right off the bat. That's fucking fake. You guys are being duped." And it was like, and ever since that day in 2012, I have seen every single thing I have seen about this guy or anything he has done is fake. It's always been like, there's not a doubt in my mind. Like I have a couple video analyzations that are just like, bro, they're duping you guys like hardcore. And all those same questions that apply to NASA apply to SpaceX. And obviously, the old 60s, this is why they're like, they got rid of the shuttle, because they can't keep up the shuttles. Like the shuttle looks like a fucking, it's a freaking school bus with wings, like they know people in 2025 aren't going to believe that the space shuttle's still going up there, that old space shuttle from the 50s, so it's like they had to retire this stuff, and they had to bring like a newer, more popular, cool version of it, and that's SpaceX. And it's like people think that SpaceX is this independent, like it's a private company, when it's a front for big government's new NASA. Like Elon Musk is NASA 2.0.
Honestly, it's a great theory, because that'd be controlled opposition,
It's basically it's sky communism. Like it's crazy like what he's pushing, and everybody's totally into it because everyone thinks he's cool. And so he's doing all this cool shit, but then he slides in the sky communism shit, and it's like everyone's like, yeah, sign me up. And it's like, hey fools, you guys are all anti-communists online, but you're stroking off this dude who's pushing sky communism. Like, holy crap. You're going to go live on Mars? Like, that's going to be like prison. Like, you'll be locked in a box somewhere in the desert thinking that you're in space when you aren't, like it's all BS, and it's also obviously BS. And it's like,
I've got an interesting theory.
Yeah.
What if Elon Musk is doing all this like augmented reality brain chip sort of stuff, and space at the same time, so he can just basically have people get into a little, what they're convinced is a rocket ship, flick on that brain chip real quick, and just puts them out, like puts them in like a dream state, just carts them off somewhere, and like, you're in space now. Like that would be like the ultimate con.
Yeah.
I can totally see
that.
Yeah,
and they say they don't want us on TikTok, and they don't want us on these things, but those are the places where like all the bullshit's happening. Like people are passing around Joe Rogan deepfake videos like crazy right now, and everyone thinks they're real, like because they're that good. So it's like, and then I've known about deepfake since 2011 or something. So like, how long did they have it before? How many videos that we think are legit aren't? The other thing, I went to this Air and Space Museum in downtown. I took my kid there. And they have like footage running, and it's like really, 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 really obviously fake on the footage and the screens they have running at the Science Academy or the Science Museum. Like I was blown away by how bad it looked on their stuff, like their stock stuff. It looked like painfully like bad, like ET era CGI, you know. And you're just like, wow, like you guys, they're just shameless about it because they have a budget. You know, they got to stick to a budget. Everyone wants to make money, so they're spending the least amount of money keeping that shit up. You know, like they still all the like, you know, when they beam into like a news station, like all that stuff still looks fucking awful. Like it's not convincing to anyone who's like really, you know, open-mindedly looked at the stuff. It's just like, yeah, these people are bouncing around on cables, you know. It's absolutely nuts.
Yeah, that one video that you uploaded recently that was showing like the space station people like bouncing around, and it's like you could very obviously see that the dude, like a couple of the dudes were wearing those little like basically just bungee cords and just like flying back and forth trying to make it look like
it's basic acrobat stuff, and it's like it's stunt stuff. It's stuff that they use in the movies. You're wearing a harness, and it's just to black cables, and they just CGI out the cables. It's easy to do, but you can see the line. You can see the cables still in a lot of their footage. It's so bad. They have like, you know, who knows with these weird inbred Freemasons or something that they have working for NASA, that they have doing these videos, you know, lying to everyone. They're obviously a part of the team because they know that they're duping everyone. They know they're not in space. So, and then you look at all these people, and they're like really like sickly looking people, like not the most fit, smartest sounding. You know, like a lot of the people almost look inbred. Like it's really weird to me. Like I've been noticing this forever. I was like, what's up with all these haggard people up at the space station, you know? And it's like, if you're a part of some weird clique that's lying to the world, you know, that's what happens. People start inbreeding, you know, like you keep it in the club, like shit, the gene pool gets messed up over several generations, and we're getting to this generation and it's just like, dude, these aren't the best and brightest people that the world has to offer to be going into space. Like these people are like, it's just, you just look at them and you're like, what? Like, and then I guarantee you couldn't, if you hardcore researched, you know, a lot of these people, you just find dead ends, you know. They're just made, you know, and like that video showed all the people that blew up in the Challenger, they're all still around.
No. I heard about that. That's interesting though. I've noticed that on like some kind of different unrelated like research I've done is that, you know, that thing you're talking about with like leads, things just kind of disappearing. I've noticed that looking into certain things that like people getting into certain positions, if you like find them on like LinkedIn or something, like it would just be like completely normal, you know, background and everything. Then all of a sudden they're like, oh, they have this like paying position at this field. Like they just, you know, obviously being planted.
John Bob, quiet. You got to turn your mic down. It picks up everything. Or just mute when you're talking to your dog or something.
My sweetie's annoying me. I'm sorry, guys. I've been petting her for about 20 minutes, and she just won't stop, like, hounding me for loving. Okay, I'm done. Sorry.
Muting up between talking is a very good a good practice if you're going to be YouTubing. Just anybody, just because the sound just gets worse when everyone's got their mic on and there's a little bit of background. Like it gets kind of worse. So it's good if you're like, if you know you aren't going to be talking for a little bit, just to mute up. But yeah, John Bob's. Go ahead. Sorry, Braxton.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, pretty much just that point that there's just a lot of really suspicious like activity out there with people getting these strange careers out of nowhere. And then I was going to say to your point about like NASA people too, it's like, hate to say, but most of the people that you see out and about wearing any kind of like NASA merch they're not the best looking people. I mean, as far as even
Or
if
they're just NPCs. They're just like
Yeah.
they're just college students, you
you can
know,
tell
and
there's
like
not much going on up there.
yeah,
might
they've
look
been
a little-
institutionalized. They're like thoroughly institutionalized. Some
Yeah.
of us, you know, and like I thought NASA was super cool until I didn't think it was cool anymore, and I started researching it and was like, oh, they could have easily pulled this off on us, you know, and like people are like, oh, it's gonna be so hard to do that, and it's like, no, it's not. As long as there's a hierarchy of information in the world, you know, which there is in the United States, you know, you're having faith that the people are telling you the truth about what's going on in the world. Bill Gates owns more cattle than anyone in the world. I don't know what Blue Bass is trying to say, that he pushes veganism. But
the guy pushes everything because he's selling everything as he's forcing injections of heavy metal. But I will tell you this, he's claiming we got duped because we're eating plants. You're eating chemically reacted corpses that give you worms, dude. Who's really duped?
That are also vaccinated, that also eat way more pesticides. They completely destroy the land wherever they go. Like there's not a single good thing going in that camp.
Dude, it's bad. Meat eaters are betas. They literally flood their body with estrogen, literally using saturated fats and cholesterol, clogging their own arteries and shrinking their own genitalia as they like try and talk shit to the vegans. It's weird, dude.
Blue Bass. How does that make any sense? Bill Gates is one of the largest owners of cattle in the world. So why would he be so in the business of cattle if he doesn't want people to eat cows? That doesn't make any sense, dude. He's got cow farms all around the world.
Yeah, the only way I could really see that, like,
definitely owns more cows than your buddy Garland Farms.
Yeah, the only way I could really see that being feasible, like the whole thing of like them trying to hoard, is like that same mentality that, you know, kings live to be really fat and like really unhealthy, and they were eating all those really gluttonous foods, and so it just reflected on how tyrannical they were, how, like, you know, willing to execute people just like that. It's like we're kind of getting a lot of that with the carnivore folks.
Yeah,
not too much of a coincidence.
And speaking of carnivore folks, this video is quite the doozy. I don't know if you guys know about my history with Joey Schwartz, but